Another point, another stumbling block that sometimes we experience is a misconception, sometimes by government, that if a nonprofit contracts with or receives a grant from a government entity, and whether it's state, city, or federal, sometimes there's an expectation that that nonprofit is a subsidiary of government, when really I think it's important to clarify that nonprofits are independent, private organizations that act on their own, and they are not subsidiaries of government. And so we like to term it more of a partnership, where government and nonprofit sector are going hand in hand into the community together to provide these types of services. So just wanted to make that important clarification and expectation on the part of the sector.
I'd also like to add that one of the expectation of government is that we should pay on time, because a lot of the grants are given early in the fiscal year, and some nonprofits don't, they don't receive their money until the year, months after. And nonprofits have to pay rent, they have to pay their employees, and many times they have to borrow money waiting for this grant money to come in. So I think government also has that duty to pay up as soon as possible.
There are a number of questions that relate to priorities, right? And so I guess the broader question is there a strategic plan that anybody has of, in this particular year or these next 3 years, here are the higher priorities for these justifications, whether it be keep the usual suspects going, or let new ones in, or certain sectors that are hurting more. Could you talk a little bit about priorities or lack of priority?
As mentioned, this Department of Community Services every 5 years conducts or creates a consolidated plan, which includes public participation process, where we host public meetings and ask the communities and the nonprofits to come forward and share what from their perspective do they see as the needs. It could be anything from childcare, senior programs, to community improvements, sidewalks, accessibility. So those things all get incorporated into the city's 5-year consolidated plan. And each year when we do the request for proposals for our CDBG money, the projects that we fund must somehow address a need that's in the bigger consolidated plan.
Thank you. And there are instances where, maybe some nonprofits do not follow in that plan, such as the Hawaii Theater or the festivals. And that's why I think we have to look at other needs of the city. And the council tried to provide for that by adding some money to the budget, because there are other needs, for the members of the public who want to participate in arts and culture. And the mayor's office does give out grants for culture and the arts. There's so many facets to being a good city, and we should provide for all those needs, not just what's in the plan. And so there has to be these other sources of money to provide for those other priorities.
I guess I can't speak to any strategic plan by the city, but I would echo our two speakers that in order for our society or our community to be vibrant, there's a myriad of services that enrich our lives. So everything from the safety net services of immediate response to those who are disadvantaged and most in need, to the other end of the spectrum, the sort of symphony and culture and the arts and other things in our community and educational programs, environmental monitoring, invasive species tracking, all of those types of things that protect us economically and again lend to the richness of our lives. And so I appreciate that point.
If I could just add that I spoke to the federal CDBG money, but the City Grants-in-Aids Fund does provide for application for cultural and arts types programs as well. And you have a handout, well, we have a handout here we can share that gives you a list of the, I think it was 134 organizations that applied for grants and aid money in this last round. You can get a flavor for the breadth of organizations.
There are a number of questions relating to monitoring after someone gets funding. And one in particular, so monitoring in general, but one in particular is when partnering with a faith-based nonprofit, is there any requirement that they keep their religious activities separate from publicly funded activities? If yes, how is this monitored?
The answer is yes. They're not allowed to teach their religion. However, so we focus on, we monitor that they're addressing the community need. And the one that's near and dear to my heart, because my former employer was St. Francis Healthcare System, and they built a preschool and an adult daycare using some federal CDBG money. So they do not promote their religion within the curriculum of the preschool. However, they teach preschool, and it's taught by Catholic nuns and laypersons as well. So as our staff goes out from the city to monitor, they're more concerned with, are we serving the children with the right educational curriculum of low to moderate income families, because that's what the CDBG money is targeting.
Well, Catholic Charities also does a lot of good work in the community, and they do not impose any kind of their religious beliefs on their programs. So they provide a lot of good service. The Buddhist Church also. So I know that the department does a very good job of monitoring that.
I again can't speak to the government side, but certainly IRS rules have it such that there are protections in place that prevent nonprofits from engaging in any kind of religious or political activity, because it would jeopardize the nonprofit status. So.
One more for Lisa, and you can repeat this so they can hear.
Okay.
Do nonprofits raise the issue of red tape, bureaucracy, forms? I wear 20 hats as head of my nonprofit. The issue of monitoring, is it considered onerous and bureaucratic from the nonprofit world?
So the question, in case you didn't hear, was do nonprofits provide any feedback about how onerous it sometimes can be to be addressing some of the red tape and the bureaucracy in the attempt to partner with government, whether it's the application process or reporting processes. And while we haven't really had much kind of involvement at the city level, certainly Hano has been heavily involved in really looking at the state bureaucracy and the contracting system. Not so much the grant and aid program at the legislature, but really the purchase of service contracting process. And in the paper that we left at the front, we do address, for instance, if you have Catholic Charities as an example, and Catholic Charities has several contracts with government at the city level and many at the state with, say, Department of Health, Department of Human Services, Public Safety. They have, every time they go in for a contract, they must apply in a separate way. So one of the things that we've advocated for is a document bank that government might have, a repository really of all common documents to all departments that are the basic sets of financial information, your IRS letter, all of those types of things your audit, that can go in once into the document bank that various different departments can access, so that the nonprofit doesn't have to keep doing this each time. And similarly on the reporting end, because some of the outcomes that they must demonstrate to these different disparate departments is sometimes the same data, that could there be some consolidation of that reporting and data so that it doesn't have to be done 3 times in 3 slightly different manners. So those are the kinds of things that we're contemplating. An example of that, we're sitting on a government contracting task force with state level officials to try to make those kinds of IT transformations that might expedite processes a little bit, business processes a little bit more. Another great one is EFT. If your contract or your grant allocation can be deposited into your checking account automatically, then the nonprofit doesn't have to deal with some of those cash flow challenges when payments don't come in a timely manner. So, I mean, I can speak probably ad nauseum about this issue, but I'll, for the sake of time, let it sit at that.
Well, I think that's great that Hano's doing this, because when you think of red tape, bureaucracy, you know, you think government, that's government. Not only in the grant area, but permits, all of the government services. We should streamline and make it easier for people to do business. And I'm glad to hear that Hano's looking at the efficient ways, especially for monitoring. If it could be just a one-page, easy to submit. As I say, a lot of these small groups, their executive directors have to do everything. They have to do the reporting, they have to do the grant writing, they're the custodian. So let's make it as easy as is possible for our nonprofits.
I'll echo from both of them that we acknowledge that it's difficult often to complete all of the regulatory requirements. But two things that we have recently embarked on to address that. One is when we issued the RFP for the Grants-in-Aids, we offered classes to, in fact, it was mandatory that anybody who intended to apply to the Grants-in-Aid Fund attend a class so we could walk them through that entire application, including what the expectations were going to be in order to get reimbursed and receive your payments, assuming that you did receive a grant award, so that folks would understand how to best apply and know that they were going to be held accountable in the long run. And we attempted to streamline it so that your proposal budget and forms were going to be part of your payment request form, so it was a consistent flow of documentation. And the other piece is we just recently finished, about 2 weeks ago, some technical assistance training from the HUD office. They sent some consultants down from the mainland to look at how we run our city CDBG program and what are the best practices in the mainland. And when they looked at our monitoring report, which was about this thick, they asked us, well, who reads this? And we had to acknowledge that it was only about 5 people in the whole department that looked at it. And they showed us a 3-page checklist, which is the best practice nationally. And so we're going to be transitioning toward that very simple checklist. So it's kind of like your tax return. If you're checking off yes, you're all good. If you're checking off no, then give us an explanation why. And very much user-friendly. Thank you.
There were also a number of questions relating to the committees and offices that are reviewing grants and whether or not they actually do reflect a broad sector of the community. Are they, you know, folks that the city has worked with a lot and therefore trust them? Does that mean that if you're new, you might have difficulty getting your voice in? So could you talk a little bit about maybe what's behind the scenes review and whether or not that aspect of community participation is broad enough?
I will tell you that the Grants-in-Aids Commission consists of 7 members appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. And we did look for some diversity in background in terms of someone who may have had nonprofit experience, some who had financial business experience, and general government experience and general business experience. So we looked for a broad range of skill sets to be a part of that commission, and then they were approved by council. The CDBG committee is 3 members appointed by the council and 3 members appointed by the mayor, all approved by the council, correct? Yes, and then a jointly selected chairperson. So from that perspective, we do look for a broad range of skill sets.
Thank you. What's disappointing is at the end, when we're given these recommendations, sometimes it's very close to the deadline. And so I was told, like for the recent GIA approvals, that I would have to vote yes. And you know, that always sets out this warning bell in my head. I keep then going to my This is America speech, where in America we can vote yes or no. But sometimes it's just too close to the deadline and we're told we have to vote yes. So we somehow have to work on this process, and I'm very glad that our new director is very open to making any kind of changes that'll work.